So once again, a happy Veterans Day to the veterans. Thank you for serving. But once again, as I heard even today at the Arsenal Island, thank the family for their dedication also, because that makes a big difference. The kids, the wives, the husbands, the fathers, the parents, et cetera, are also giving. And so it's a great day to be to honor them. A little bit on the sad news, we had another council member here, Randy Hurt. He unfortunately in our little break here fell down, got hurt, and so he will not be attending tonight for that reason. And Ivory Clark, Alderman, we knew was going to be absent, but so we are short one that we planned on. So with all of that, let's get this thing formally started and do a roll call, please.
Well, Alderman Hurt, absent. Alderman Spargettis.
Present.
Alderwoman Swanson.
Here.
Alderman Parker.
Here.
Alderman Poulos.
Here.
Alderman Geenan.
Present.
Alderman Clark, absent. Mayor Tomes.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right. We do start out with having an opportunity for people to speak. There's been two people that have signed up, and they are Ann. Is Ann here? Ann would like to come up?
Hello. Hello, my name is Anna Almquist, and first of all, I want to thank all the veterans in the room for your service. I come from a family of military family, sorry. My father was in the Air Force for over 20 years. My brother, Matt, served in the Army. My brother, Zachary, is a veteran of the Iraq War. My brother, Paul, just recently returned from Syria. They all fought for my freedom and my right as an American worker. It is my understanding that is my federal protected right under Section 7 of the NLRB Act form to assist and join a union. My coworkers and I have exercised our right and organized. We have reached our majority status. We have asked GTI to recognize our union and offered a third, sorry, it's my first time speaking.
Right. Oh, good.
Offered to have a third party verify our majority status. Sadly, GTI has failed to respond to its employees or Teamster Local 371 and have instead violated multiple labor laws and have tainted our workplace with threats and broken promises. The reason I am here is to ask that our mayor and our city council stand with their constituents and hold GTI accountable for their actions. We are working members of your community, and we have played a part in electing you to office. My hope is that you will demand GTI to respect and obey the law, respect their workers, and respect the working families in Rock Island. This is a pivotal time in your service. Are you with your constituents, or are you against us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Scott Beard. I'm the Vice President of Teamsters Local 371 right here in Rock Island, Illinois. Again, on Veterans Day, both my grandfathers served and my younger brother served as well. So I can't say that I know the service that they have given, but I respect it. I'm here to talk about the employees of GTI that want to form a union. They're asking for recognition from GTI. They have majority status to form this union. We believe that GTI has committed multiple unfair labor practice violations. There are 5 filed at this time. These are serious charges. Through fear and intimidation, GTI is trying to stop their employees from forming a union. The Rock Island City Council has the authority and the duty to hold GTI accountable for breaking the law if they are found to do so. I am here to ask you to tell GTI that you will hold them accountable if they have been found to have broken the law. The Teamsters Local 371 have supported some of you in the past. We would like to continue having a working relationship with all of you on this council. I would like to invite all of you to the hall to sit down, and then we can discuss any questions you have regarding these charges and the organizing effort that we have ongoing. I've handed out my card to all of you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. That's my personal cell phone number on there, my email. We are willing to sit down and discuss any questions you have and trying to get this figured out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up on the agenda was Terry Elliott.
Hi, I'm sure you remember me, the sewer lady.
Yes.
Yeah. When you told me to go out in the hallway with Mr. Thornson and that he would take care of things, I thought I would get a check and everything would be taken care of. And it's been a 3-month thing, and they offered me $9,500, and I said okay. And then I got home and started adding things up, and that meant I still had to pay $1,000. I didn't choose for this to happen. I called 4 plumbers. They said the line wouldn't go down any more than 100 feet. It had to have been the city. I called them. Nobody cared to come over and look at my basement. I mean, this wasn't watery sewage. This was after the water drained off, and it was literally sludge. It was horrible living conditions. I don't know what to do. Mr. Castelline said that you aren't over the money allocations, that it has to go through a committee. So this is what the committee is doing. You know, they're offering me this, 95 is the bottom line. I don't have $1,000. I've got a lien on my house because of this. I'd really like to get it settled. And, Mr. Castelline also told me that they decided that the sewer line collapsed on May 31st. How they know this, I don't know. And they would pay me everything past May 31st. So that got them out of paying for the jetting and the scope, which Mr. O'Brien had told me I needed to do to prove that my line was patent. So they're wanting me to pay for things they told me to do. And I'm at a loss. If you have any suggestions, I don't have $1,000, and I don't feel I should have to pay for what happened to me.
No, we don't typically respond.
Yeah, well, if we could just, do we have your phone number on there? I don't think we do,
I
do we?
don't think so.
If I can get your phone number.
309 373 1920.
Okay, I'm familiar with the fact that you have a case, but I'm not familiar with the details. I know the city attorney's on the committee as well as a number of other of our legal staff and some outside people also. So we'll have to take a look at it and get all the details.
Okay, and if you can't figure something out, maybe you could give me a suggestion of
Sure,
my next step.
I sure will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the people that signed up for the public comment. So then we are on to item number 6.
Minutes of the October 28th, 2019 meeting.
Move to approve the minutes as printed.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Item number 7.
Minutes of the executive session of October 28th, 2019.
Move to approve the executive session minutes.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Item number 8 is update. Got a couple items here. Holiday garbage collection. Garbage and yard waste collection will be on the normal collection schedule during the week of Veterans Day holiday. However, due to the inclement weather, curbside recycling collection will be 1 day late all week. The drop-off center located at Millennium Waste, 13606 Knoxville Road, Milan, will be open on Saturday from 7 a.m. to noon. We got the Community Comforts Donation Drive. Throughout the month of November, Rock Island Public Library will be hosting their first Community Comforts Donation Drive, which aims to collect resources for Rock Island organizations fighting homelessness and housing insecurity. They are collecting toiletries, non-perishable shelter food, paper products, cleaning supplies, and new clothing. Collection boxes are at each library location through November 30th. As we prepare for another long winter, please think of these in need and give today. Thank you for the generosity. Learn about cannabis legalization. In a major change in Illinois law, recreational use of cannabis will be legalized in 2020. To help answer questions about impacts and issues of this new law, the Rock Island Public Library and the City of Rock Island Community Economic Development Department will host a panel discussion on Tuesday, November 12th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Rock Island Downtown Library at 401 19th Street. The moderated discussion featuring experts in human resources, law and law enforcement, medicine, government, and the cannabis business. Attendees may submit questions in advance at the Rock Island Public Library location, and at the event, beverages and light refreshments will be available. The event is free and open to the public. 30th Annual Thanksgiving Dinner, November 24th, 2019, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center. Come enjoy the delicious free Thanksgiving meal and warm holiday cheer. All are welcome. Thanksgiving at the King Center is about community and hospitality. It's all about welcoming friends and family to share a meal that has been lovely prepared because that is what people do during the holidays. Dine in only, no carryout. On November 24th, to schedule a delivery of 20 or more meals on November 23rd, please call 309-732-2999. I plan on being there to help carve up some turkey and serve it also, so look forward to it. Item number 9.
Proclamation declaring November 11th, 2019 as Rock Island High School Boys Soccer Day. Proclamation, whereas Rock Island High School Boys Soccer, led by head coach Rudy Almanza, concluded their 2019 season with a record of 14-2-3, and whereas they scored a total of 59 goals with only 14 goals against and had a record of 7-0 this season in the Western Big Six. And whereas not only was the first time in Rock Island High School history that the boys soccer team has won the Western Big Six conference title outright, this was also their first regional championship win. And whereas 3 members of this team, senior Isaac Almanza, senior Subik Leon, and junior Jordan Rice, were selected for the Western Big Six Conference, all-conference first team, along with senior Peter Kimba, selected for the second team, and senior Osvaldo Perez and junior Isaiah Kerr given honorable mention. And whereas, with many key players returning for the 2020 season, we look forward to another successful season next year.
Therefore, now I, Mike Tomes, Mayor of City of Rock Island, proclaim November 11th, 2019 as Rock Island High School Boys Soccer Day in the City of Rock Island, Illinois, and call upon the citizens of our community to join me in congratulating this 2019 Rock Island Rocks team on their accomplishments and wish them further success in the seasons to come. So if you guys want to come up, and gals, and
Yeah, come on in. Oh, yeah? Yeah, they're pretty skilled. Okay.
good to see you. Superintendent, you coming up for a picture too? Yeah. You're part of the team.
Now, look at the shiny head guy first. The shiny head guy first. Him first.
Dr. Lawrence is here? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Either way.
Get in there, Get in there, Mr. Mayor.
I like it when I take the pictures because it gives me a moment to keep council meeting.
Sure is in there.
Go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Keep smiling. Look at the bald guy over here.
I thought you were talking to me.
I know. Everybody get on picture? Yep. That's good.
Great. Nice.
Pretty unbelievable.
I don't want to say too much. I just want to say thank you, Mayor Tomes, City Council members for inviting us out here tonight. Thank you, Ms. Lewis, Dr. Lawrence for coming out and supporting. But to my family and to my soccer family, I appreciate everything. To my boys, the returners, I can't wait. For my seniors, good luck in the future. But play hard, have fun is what we talked about all season, and just believe in the dream. And I think we accomplished what we wanted to this year and can't wait for the future. Thank you.
See you guys next year up here, huh?
No, I want to say you're bullied. You've been bullied all life.
Congratulations.
No, you can head out if you want, that's fine. I don't know how long it's gonna be for the rest of it, so you can do whatever you wish, but. Okay. Those want to, if you're interested in listening to the rest of the city council, they're more than welcome to stay. Most people don't stay. Most people don't. All right, I'll give you that.
Yeah, oh, God. You mean to tell me high schoolers aren't interested in civic municipal government?
Pretty certain.
How many are really interested in staying?
Me, when I was a high school student.
Were you playing on the soccer team?
No, I was definitely not playing on the soccer team. Not one of the athletic participants. Oh, yeah, followed up with this. They definitely am glad that they're leaving.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense.
All right, item number 10.
Presentation of the financial management report for the third quarter 2019.
See if I'm working. Good.
Found the clicker. Where was it?
All right, well, you guys get to listen to me for a while tonight. I have 3 presentations for you this evening, and they're in perfect order. So this is a great time to start before we talk about next year's budget. Where are we this year? And so this first presentation is the third quarter financial management report. The first schedule is our revenues, expenditures, and net position for all of the city's funds. And this is at the September 30th point, and so we would expect to be at the 75% revenues or expenditures with each of the funds, although they each have their own characteristics of timing of revenues and expenditures, and even whether we spend the funds that we have budgeted. This first page represents the grouping of all of our governmental funds, and the first row is the general fund, and at the third quarter, we were at 67% of revenues and 69% of expenditures, right at where we normally are. We will look at the general fund expenditures by department on the next schedule. The second page of the schedule of the revenues, expenditures, and net position highlights the remaining types of funds of the city. The first grouping is our proprietary funds. Then we have our fiduciary funds, which include our pension trust funds, and then our component units, which are the MLK funds. We'll draw your attention to the bottom row of the schedule, which is the summary totals of all the funds. We were at 81% of revenues collected at this point and 52% of expenditures. That very last number at the bottom right in the cash available column is $29.1 million in cash across all of the funds. That represents 78 days of operating expenditures. And then do keep in mind, we do have our principal and interest payments due December 1st, and that will be $5.3 million in payments that will be setting up. It's always shocking to see that, but we'll be setting those up for ACH payment here in a couple of weeks. So the next schedule. This is our general fund expenditures by department, and so as I said, we're at 69% of expenditures at the third quarter point. Most all of the departments were under the 75%, which is great news, and sometimes when you look at quarters, they can be a little goofy because sometimes there's more pay periods in one quarter or another, but this particular quarter had 20 pay periods, which is 77% of our personnel expenses. So just to take a step back before we move forward, as we're getting ready to work on the budget, one of the things I'm really looking at is, how are we performing both in revenues and expenditures? And the general fund is one of our more challenging funds to balance, and so I'm feeling good from an expenditure standpoint in the general fund that we are on track. The next schedules are fund schedules, state and local tax revenue analysis. Probably got a chance to look at this before tonight, but it's mixed news, some good things, some bad things, but overall in total, we're looking like this is a good year. The first two taxes on this schedule are income tax and replacement tax. And so income tax, we are definitely trending ahead of budget. We had a nice large distribution early in the year in that March actual column of $783,000. One of the things I do too when I'm getting ready for tonight is I'm looking at where we were last year as this kind of a similar trend, but I'm also looking at where we were in second quarter. So were we trending ahead? And we were trending ahead. So we're consistent with second quarter. And so I do estimate that we will finish ahead of budget in the income tax category by $400,000. Replacement tax, I cautiously anticipate that we'll be at $3.1 million at the end of the year. We've received our major distributions for the year. We have one more in December, so I would expect that will be $800,000 ahead of budget. So sales tax and local option sales tax, not as good of a picture, but not materially off of budget. This trend, as we see, as we annualize receipts through the month of September, the trend is that we're going to miss budget. This is a similar trend to where we were at second quarter. So we'll have to watch this. And we did keep this in mind when working on the 2020 budget. Use taxes has actually increased its variance from budget from the second quarter, so looking good, and I estimate that we'll be budget by $100,000. This is one where you can see when you look at the first columns where we have 5-year average. So 934,000 was our 5-year average. We budgeted 1.1 million. And so this continues to trend up. I would expect it to kind of level off a little bit here, but we'll take it while we can. Utility tax staying pretty even, and looks like we'll be right at budget. Telecom, this is not one of the prettier ones. So we budgeted 775,000. The annualized projected annual is at 737,000. So looking like we'll miss budget by 40,000. This is one of those taxes, I know I mention this every quarter, that continues to decline. You can see from the 5-year average, we were at 893,000. Getting ready for tonight, you know, looking back a few years, definitely a trend down. If I were to show you a graph over multi-years, 2016 we had 946,000 in telecom. So 3 years later, we're almost 200,000 less. Food and beverage tax. So this is that locally collected 1.5% portion of the sales tax, following a similar trend as our sales tax and local option sales tax that we mentioned earlier. So running a little behind budget. Gaming tax is not a general fund revenue, but it is one that we look at when we're looking at taxes. We budgeted 4.4 million. It's looking like we'll be closer to 4.3, and 4.3 million is actually what we received in 2018. So even with the 2018 fiscal year. So all of these taxes roll up into a total. That bottom table and graph there, it's a nice number, and it will help us to look at 2020. But we are right now at collections of $16,495,035. Boy, still working on formatting this, but it's these next couple of schedules are the summary of our investments at that snapshot point of September 30th. 2019 total investments of 29.1 million, as we saw in that first schedule, and you can see the various places that we keep these funds. $8 million in IMET, and the second biggest category was Illinois funds. You can also see from that middle column chart that, you know, month to month our cash balances do fluctuate. A low point often in the year is December and April. So December, of course, when we pay those principal and interest payments, and then in April is kind of the low point before property taxes start coming back in. On this next page, we have the interest rate earnings on each of those investment and cash categories, and then we also have the breakdown of our investments by bank. So it is important that we try to diversify our funds as much as possible, and so we look at this throughout the year and try to move funds where it's convenient for use and to get yield, and try to keep any one bucket at a certain amount. All of our funds are collateralized through various agreements with providers. So FDIC insurance only is $250,000 per investment, and so we do collateralize all of our deposits. The last schedule, we don't spend time on this one, but it's the capital and major project expenditure status report. Accounting will just pull in all of the different projects, not all of them, but a bunch of the different projects that are going on, what their budget was, and how many, the total of payments that have been made on each of those. And grand total at this point, we were at 66% of projects, which is right about where we should be at this time of year. Any questions on the third quarter financial management report? Hearing none, we will move on to the 2020 budget.
We got the CIP first.
Presentation of the calendar year 2020 CIP budget.
Yep.
All right, 28 slides, a minute per slide. Here we go. No, just kidding. Take as much time as we need. All right.
CIP first or the budget?
C-
Should be the
CIP.
Is it CIP?
Yeah.
CIP.
All right. All right, so we'll start with the CIP budget. Our CIP plan is a 5-year prioritized list of projects, and it begins with departments submitting requests for projects and contracts and special initiatives, et cetera. We do go through that list and compare it to the available funding sources in which are available to fund those requests, and it's supported by many different funding sources. One of the big ones that's harder to program is the gaming funds. Not as much available gaming funds and with which to work with, but we also use enterprise funds and now the general fund and some other new sources of funds that we haven't seen in the CIP plan in the past, which are kind of exciting, and we'll highlight that in this presentation and in the next one. As staff are going through the CIP requests, we do try to be consistent with our priorities for the city and goals, council goals that you all have. So the total CIP budget includes right now $14.4 million in total projects. There's some nice little summary schedules at the end of that spreadsheet, but the miscellaneous category adds up to 41% and includes a lot of different things, but including development agreements and other projects throughout all of the departments. And then the other biggest categories are some water projects at 6% and 8% for streets. So what are our funding sources this year in the plan? The biggest piece of the pie is 36% is TIF. So we do highlight the development agreements that we have with various developers in the TIF because they are generally supporting capital projects. Might not necessarily be our own capital assets, but capital assets of the city. 31% of the funding source for the 14 million is gaming. And then in the green pie, you see user fees and others, and that's at 19%. Also, funding sources include fleet, contributions, and grants. And then local gas tax is one of the new categories that you see here, and we'll talk about how we're planning to program that locally collected tax. And also new this year is general fund. So there's a tiny little pie, 1% of the general fund. Well, one of the things I often talk about when we're looking at the CIP plan is that gaming has been funding some general fund contracts. And it's not that they won't going forward, but trying as much as possible to bring some of those projects into the general fund, into operations, and not counting on gaming for those. So you will see some general fund supported expenses. So that's new this year. Largest focus area, again, is at miscellaneous. This is 45% and not 41% like that slide a couple slides ago, and that's because in this miscellaneous category, I put in contributions too, and contributions are what we call the payments that we might make to social service agencies, the gaming grants, Quad City Botanical Center, DARI, and the like. So that's where the other 4% came from. I was freaking out when I saw the 45%. I'm like, why doesn't it match the 41% on the slide a couple before? But that's what that is. 13% water and wastewater, stormwater, 8% streets, like we mentioned earlier. We are planning some fleet replacement this year. And so we did talk about fleet a little bit earlier in the study session. So I am excited that we do have a multi-year cash flow plan for fleet replacement that marries contributions, continued contributions into the fleet fund for purchasing some vehicles outright. Not that we're going to be leasing all of them, but it marries that with a balanced approach to leasing some fleet. And so kind of excited about some accounting changes that we're making to help us manage that process. So what are some of the utilities projects that are in the CIP budget? Water, wastewater, and stormwater all have projects programmed, $820,000 in the water fund, mostly water main replacement. Wastewater also has some sanitary sewer replacement. You'll see the term rate study in both water and wastewater. So we'll be talking about that a little bit next week when the departments present their budgets to you, about the feeling that we do need to do a rate study for our utility funds and have someone come in and put together a picture and help us with that process. Stormwater, $764,000, outfall work and storm sewer reconstruction. So with these enterprise funds, there still could be some changes in the final CIP plan. Any changes that we make to the budget, because it's a constantly fluid document, and it really is like, have you ever heard me say the budget is a year-long process? It is. How many council meetings are we doing budget adjustments? And it truly is always changing. At some point, we need to say we're done, and have everything balanced so that we can do our appropriations ordinance. But what I wanted to say is when we bring that appropriations ordinance forward to you on December 9th, we will highlight any changes from tonight and next week that are in that appropriations ordinance. So same thing with the CIP plan. All right, streets. Streets right now has $575,000 programmed for the beginning of engineering for 31st Avenue resurfacing, and if I recall, this is a state-funded reconstruction that will take place in a couple of years. So we do have some engineering costs that we need to work on, and then the bulk of that $575,000 is Black Hawk Hills and River Heights Road reconstruction work. Street maintenance, this is an exciting number. We haven't seen this number the past few years. $600,000 devoted to mill and fill, sidewalk repair, brick street repair, and concrete street patching. We are changing how we are accounting for this street maintenance. So if we could just take a step back, earlier in this year, should have looked it up, but I think it was June. It might have been the end of May, beginning of June. Council passed a resolution requesting that the finance department and the city take the locally collected gas tax, so that local portion, which is now 5 cents a gallon, and dedicate it to streets. So previously it was going into the general fund. All the local gas stations fill out a monthly tax return, turn it into the finance department, and we deposit it into the general fund. And that generally supported the general fund generally. So we don't target revenues that come into the general fund to a specific action or a specific person or a specific project. And so, I'm always kind of a little shocked when I'm pulling a general fund report and the list of revenues that support all of these funds is like, if I were to print a spreadsheet, it would probably be about that tall, 6-8 inches, in a level that you could read and wouldn't be too very small. But then that list of all the expenses, would probably, if we laid out all the papers, would probably be from the front of the room to the back of the room and maybe back again. So at any rate, the local gas tax would stay in the general fund and support the general fund in general. And so when that resolution passed, we agreed to look at the accounting. And so we've actually set up a new capital projects fund that we're calling Capital Projects Streets. And there is a transfer in the budget that transfers what we expect to get in local gas tax from the general fund to this new capital projects street fund. And then we have expenses budgeted for that work. And so what we're budgeting is $552,000 in receipts. And these are some of the programs that we will be covering. So kind of excited about it. It's painful too, because part of that meant $500,000 less in the general fund that we needed to work on filling that gap. So sorry to spend so much time on it. The labor of love, it's good, it's scary, but it is really, I think, good for the city. I think should be a good selling point for all of us, City of Rock Island residents, to buy our gas where? Right here in Rock Island. Because one of the things I would hope that we do is be able to transparently report to all of our citizens on our website or some other vehicle exactly what we're using these funds for. And that'll be exciting to be able to see that reported and see where our money's going. So enough of that. All right, contributions. So contributions, I mentioned, are contributions to usually nonprofits, and a little list of some of the ones that we support, and also events. It only makes up 3% of our CIP, but we do it through this process, very transparent. An event includes the Labor Day Parade, and also Red, White, and Boom is another one that we support with this. There are some other CIP projects, building maintenance here in City Hall, continued support for our recent marketing initiatives, citizen engagement tools, tree canopy study or partial funding of the tree canopy study, and maintenance, body-worn cameras, economic development initiatives such as facade improvements, demolition, the rebates that we have to some of our business partners and other programs support. So we talked about funding sources earlier, and with the gaming funds in particular, normally we look at the prior year's gaming revenues, take into account any projects that didn't utilize all of it, and so if a project comes in under budget, then those funds go back into the gaming fund to be considered for use in future years. So the total pie, so to speak, that we are starting with is 4.5 million. So this represents 2018 gaming tax plus funds from prior year projects that are not needed. So 4.5 million, how it's split up in the tiny little numbers in the next tables we'll be looking at is 76% of it's going to debt service, and then 11% to contributions, 11% to miscellaneous, and then a little bit of that is going to streets. And I think that was the sidewalk replacement, if I recall. Work. We're going to skip past questions because we're not ready for questions, except that this is really, really small. So I'm sure that this isn't the first time that you're looking at this, but if I were to just kind of explain how this document is laid out for council and for those in the room and listening at home, it's categorized by department. And so the first department is admin, and then we go on to CED. There's a category and then a funding source. We've talked a little bit about funding source. That first column of numbers is actually what was in the CIP plan this year, the year that we're in right now. And so I think it was like 19 million of some number, 19.1 million. The next column is what departments requested for each of those initiatives. And then the next column is recommended. So recommended is just staff trying to balance the needs of the funds and the particular gaming. And so any funding source that says gaming, if there's a number in that recommended column, it balances right now to that 4.5 million. In the CED department in particular, that's where we organize where the contributions are. For the most part, those are all similar to prior years, in some cases stretching some things out a little bit farther to help balance this year. The next part of CED is a lot of TIF-related projects, and so here's where we have some redevelopment agreements. We also set aside money for some tax auction purchases, possibly some demolitions and facade improvements. Then we move on to the finance department. Nothing too exciting there. We're the ones that get the charge of paying all of the debt service, and so that is laid out of what the debt service payments are expected to be for 2020, given our current payment schedules. And then, of course, throughout all these, line items, you see what the future years could be or might be. The debt service is certain unless we were to restructure, which we don't plan to. Then we have fire. Fire had some requests, as do, library in particular, MLK and parks. You will have the opportunity to talk to the departments next week in the budget workshops about their initiatives that they had requested. And I'm going to flip to page 15 of the presentation, or page 4 of the CIP schedule. And this is where Public Works Department starts, probably the biggest of the areas after CED, and it's organized by each of their enterprise funds, water and wastewater, and then we have streets. So one thing I wanted to point out in the streets is if you look at the bottom of page 4 of the CIP schedule, you see some references to local gas tax. And so that's where you'll see where we're programming that local gas tax. And you also see a new term called MFT. So we're actually taking some of the added state tax that comes through, and we call that MFT, motor fuel tax, and planning on specific projects. And we have that kind of planned over the next few years. And so we anticipate anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000 in added gas tax from the state, which will allow us to accomplish some bigger street projects. At the very bottom of page 5, you'll see equipment maintenance. For the most part, that normally refers to our fleet fund and fleet replacement. And so we do plan to purchase 2 refuse haulers. We actually have 4, so this gets us 2 of those replaced. I've seen pictures. They're basically welded together and might have shoestrings tying stuff together and potentially duct tape. Sewer is looking at a mini excavator. They often rent this, and so it's been studied that it would make more sense to purchase in this case. And then we did already actually approve a fire truck. You don't see that listed here. The purchase order was issued this year, and I think a partial payment was made this year, and then the remaining balance will be next year. So with that, I will stop talking for a minute. And then any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
All right, Dylan.
Yeah, I have a few. So I know at least a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, the city council, related to the contributions that we make, right? Things like the Botanical Center, Keep Rock Island Beautiful, River Action, Community Caring Conference, et cetera. There's been requests for, say, like an executive summary or something to that effect of what these organizations are doing, how are they using these taxpayer dollars, basically. Do we have that this year?
If you have specific questions on line items, Colleen can answer most of them. Or we could just put something together if you want and just put it all in one document.
Yeah, I think that would be
I mean, we've
best.
gathered all the information, so we can put it together and have it out to you this week. So you'll see it prior to the budget hearing next week.
Okay, that would be best.
Okay.
Second, and related, so I'm still learning all of the HUD fun stuff, but, so I was reading through our regional analysis of impediments to fair housing study, or whatever the language was, right? I'm close. And it identified that, I believe I have it correctly, that sort of an opportunity to further fair housing is to make sure that some of the organizations with whom that we give money to or support have things like affirmative marketing plans or affirmative fill-in-the-blank plans. Has that been on our radar? Do we do that with the like gaming funds, or the $50,000 that we share with nonprofit or social service agencies?
Gaming's not HUD, so.
Yeah,
No,
typically,
it's
we
not.
haven't looked at that as one of the requirements. I know we've talked about it.
Yeah.
And it's something we're looking into, but it hasn't been looked at.
It might be,
So many of those organizations are just
okay. Yeah?
but it's never been a requirement. Funds are actually replacing HUD public service dollars. And HUD would not ever require something like that.
Okay.
So I would not ever institute a policy like that. That stamping and
And is that specific to the $50,000 that we distribute? Okay, the CAC. I'm just thinking that perhaps, what would be a good example? Like growth or Quad City First is, I don't see where they're at on this list, but something like that. Having them required to undertake a affirmative marketing plan to make sure that they are instituting internal practices that are including all populations of, well, my interest is Rock Island, but Quad City wide. I think that might be a lever that we could pull to, you know, make sure that they are pursuing sort of a policy like that.
Okay.
So I guess that's a bigger conversation that we should consider probably in goal-setting session. But just to put on everybody's radar, I think that we have at our disposal here, you know, we control the purse strings for some of this stuff. And so how can we add some requirements and riders on just giving out money to making sure that giving out money that's going to also make sure that is benefiting all populations of Rock Island, for example. Then last, the neighborhood organization / gardens line item. This is the neighborhood matching grant fund, right? So recommended this year is $20,000. That was what we had last year, right? 20,000?
I think we funded last year 10,000.
Oh,
It's usually requested by CED for the 20,000. Now this is a newer project since I've been here. I think 17 might have been the first year.
yeah, I think last year was the first time that we had that in there.
Yeah, maybe it was last year. Okay.
Okay, well, I believe, I've asked staff, and I believe that there is some surplus funds in the current year's neighborhood organization / gardens fund. And instead of just adding, so from what I understand, we basically, we have this money to do matching grant funds for neighborhoods to put up banners or stuff like that, right? Physical improvements. However, we don't exactly have the neighborhoods organized to a point where they can take advantage of this opportunity. Some have, but very few, as I understand it. So, while there doesn't appear to be a need for this year's funding, would this council support using the surplus fund in that? I know in this list we have contribution to the Hauberg Civic Center, and I think it's at 50,000 or 15,000 is the recommended amount this year.
Yes, they requested 30.
Yes, they requested 30 because there is a lot of physical improvements needed at that facility from decades of abandoning it, frankly. And so, could I have the support of my colleagues on the city council of taking the surplus, not any of the money programmed for next year in the CIP, but just whatever we have left over in the neighborhood organizations fund from this year, and take the rest of it and share that with Parks to do with the Friends of Hauberg Civic Center through our intergovernmental agreement, or not intergovernmental, but through our memorandum of understanding for, you know, they have holes and they have leaks in the roof, there's needs for tuck pointing. Would that be okay that we use the surplus from this year to fund some of that? In addition to the 15,000 that's been recommended in the next year.
Can't
CIP.
officially vote on it, right?
No, but, I mean, that's gonna require some sort of transfer or something to that effect, I imagine, right?
If we wanted to do that, we would amend the CIP plan and make some changes in the 2020 budget. I would want to verify where we're at in the 2019 year for that line item. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, yeah.
But I could definitely do that. So we're not voting on the CIP plan tonight, so this is great to hear this kind of suggestion, and we can take that into consideration. We did budget the full 20,000 for next year in this line item, and one of the reasons is because earlier this year, council did express support for funding a new event in town, and I can't remember the exact event, but it was related to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
All
and
in Mexico.
Yes, there you go. I should know that. And then, so part of the $2020 will go to support that program.
That's no problem, and I don't want to take any money out of 2020 appropriation. Just, if we have money that we did not use, there is I mean, look at the front page of the paper yesterday, right? I mean, we get constant positive press out of our successful partnership at Harvard. They have the need.
So you're talking about 2019's budget and whatever versus, we're talking 2020 here, but.
So if we were to do that, what we would do then is, you saw that $4.5 million, pocket of money that we were spreading around. So we would actually look at increasing that $4.5 million using some of this year's unspent planned expenditures, and so we could look at that. We have done that in the past. We don't always, but we can look at that. Anything else?
But we still have a deficit budget for 2019. So even though there's extra, technically, there's not extra because we're still in the hole.
In the
So,
scheme
I mean,
of
I
the whole.
support the Harburg, but I also, I think if money's unspent, it goes to help the whole city because we're not a balanced budget. We're still in the hole.
Yeah, the 2019 budget was planned to have a deficit in it, correct?
So the general fund budget was planned to have a deficit. I think it was $719,000 using 6 or 7 days of reserves. The gaming fund, which is the dollars that we're looking at here, generally we're, kind of how I explained that, how we arrived at the $4.5 million to use is prior year's taxes plus it would have been 17's unspent dollars, or was it 18's unspent dollars rolled forward. Last year, we did use some reserves from the gaming fund as well to help fund the general fund.
Well, we can take a look at it, and staff will make a recommendation and send it out to everybody.
I do have one question. So the library requested, looks like $2 million for the HVAC for downtown. Is that being captured in the performance contract or?
Not the full 2 million, so the 2 million is a complete replacement. What's in there is a boiler, a chiller, controls, and then something down in the tech area, which I don't know what that was. That was kind of a late addition, but.
Okay.
So there is some in there, which is why there's nothing to, and we don't obviously have 2 million to fund it, but if we can chip away at it that way, so.
Okay.
Anything else?
Not on CIP.
Okay.
2020 budget.
All right, now we're at 28 pages. Okay, we do have a lot to cover in this presentation. So what we're going to cover, we will talk about our budget goals. So when we're sitting down to work on the budget, what do we want to accomplish? We will be looking at some very high-level schedules. We'll be using rounded millions because we're talking some big numbers. Got a lot going on here in the city of Rock Island. We have over 40 funds that we budget. We will focus on a few specific funds, quite a bit of focus on the general fund. We will look at a grouping of the Public Works Enterprise funds and then talk a little bit about Parks and Rec and the library and then the proposed property tax levy that's contained within the budget right now. So budget goals. First one, balanced budgets. And as Alderman Swanson points out, we don't always have balanced budgets, but at times we're using reserves, and so we do so consciously. But ideally, in any given fund, a budget's revenues exceed its expenditures. And then I always, we do have some funds that are in a deficit fund balance, and so we do try to make improvements over time incrementally. If we did it all at once, it would be a big pill to swallow in some cases. Some of the city's funds do have challenges, and it was our goal to keep financial impacts to our citizens and businesses of Rock Island to a minimum. We want to continue to provide quality services, which our citizens deserve, and they can expect to continue to receive. And it's also our goal to always keep fiscal responsibility in mind when we're making decisions. We do have financial policies that govern a portion of what we do, and every year I do take a look at those and see if we need to make any changes, and then ideally bring that forward as a separate council agenda item to review, by itself and approve, which we'll do that probably on the 25th. So let's talk big numbers first. So expenditures by fund, this is the entire city, so not just the general fund. So right now what's in the budget is $122.8 million in expenditures. Just a frame of reference, our 2018 actual citywide expenditures was very close to that number. It was 123.9 million, so we're just a little bit less than that. This chart captures total spending across 9 departments and over 40 funds. The largest portion is the general fund at $38.4 million. Going down the right side of that pie chart, the green pie is water, sewer, storm, and refuse, all lumped together at $27.6 million. Kind of going around the pie clockwise. Economic development, $8 million, includes several funds that are managed by the CED, but most significantly the 7 TIF districts, the active TIF districts that we have. All other, I'd always try to explain what these little groupings of things, so other and miscellaneous. All other is quite a few different funds, but it includes the Marina, Martin Luther King funds, gaming, internal service funds like our health insurance and liability insurance and our fleet. So looking at that same $122.8 million in citywide expenditures in a different way, this is by category, so not by fund or department. The largest slice of that pie chart is personnel costs of $52.2 million, and so that represents 42.5% of our total expenditures citywide, and this is up 2.6% from last year, which was $50.9 million. Services is that next biggest pie, $28.2 million, and then debt service and transfers are each about 9%. Revenues by type across the city is $110.8 million. Last year's revised was 109.3, so just a little bit up from last year. Charges for services, that top right quadrant is $25.7 million and represents 23% of our revenues. And a lot of charges for services would be contained within our enterprise funds, water, sewer, refuse, stormwater, but also in the general fund we do have charges for services for ambulance. Other big slice of that pie, 26.6 million, represents our internal service funds and fiduciary funds. And again, the fiduciary funds are our police and fire pensions. Property taxes are budgeted at 19.5 million, and this does not only represent the property tax levy that would be adopted in December, but also tax increment revenue that comes into the TIF districts, that property tax that's captured by nature of how those TIFs operate. Before I turn to the next slide, notice that bottom left blue pie, local and state taxes, so that's 25 million. So we'll look at some of the details of those. State and local tax, we actually looked at that a little bit earlier in those third quarter reports. This makes up 23% of our total revenue, and this is up 1% from last year. The largest portion is the top row, gaming, at $4.3 million is what we're budgeting for next year. And then sales and use tax and income tax at $4.2 million. Do have to remind you, as I do all the time, that the state takes a portion of the income tax from us, 5%. And so we are getting less than we would have just a few years ago. Locally collected home rural gas tax is that bottom row at 0.5. And we mentioned earlier that beginning with next year's budget, we do plan to transfer that to a new capital projects fund that is devoted to street maintenance. Budget challenges. So since we're talking about state and local tax, we're going to be moving on to the general fund shortly. We have had some budget challenges. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that income tax reduction. So it was originally 10%, and that started in the 2017 budget, and they did amend that to the 5%. Now nobody talks about changing that, so I think we need to get on that. But also, a few years ago, the state was helping to balance their own budget and started charging us a fee to collect our sales tax, our local option sales tax, or our home rule sales tax. It was originally 2%, and they did revise it to only 1.5%. But statewide, that original 2%, I think the Civic Federation calculated that the state was getting $60 million statewide for collecting that tax for all of us. And they were already collecting the regular tax. So at any rate, I have to say that. So a couple of new things that aren't really state related, but these are things that impact our general fund budget. There's 2 rows at the bottom. Hopefully you can see that. One is that streets funding initiative. So in 2020, we have $500,000 that's not supporting general fund operations anymore, and we're moving it over to a new fund. And then P25 radio financing impacted this budget. So as I'm highlighting, we have some revenues that are doing better this year. We also passed a deficit budget, and we've had some impacts that we didn't budget for, and one of them was the P25 radio financing. Great project. It was a multi-state, multi-county, multi-jurisdictional project that is something that we needed to do. That's now pay-as-you-go financing, which is great. At one point, we actually thought we might have to bond for those expenses. But in 2019, that was an added $475,000 in cost, so $500,000 that we didn't have in the budget. And then for 2020, our payments that are due to the county are $423,000. So, but in 2021, it's a smaller payment, and then we'll be done, and it'll be paid for, and we'll be providing a great service. So another one of our budget challenges in the general fund is police and fire pension costs. The joy of being in the state of Illinois, but here we do have a multi-year history of what our police and fire pension costs are expected to be for 2019. So these are actuarially determined. We do always levy what our actuarially determined amount is. And in 2011, it was 4.1 million, and in 2019, and that's 7.2 million. So that is a $3.1 million increase. For CY 2020, There are also other pension costs, of course, FICA and IMRF, FICA and Medicare and IMRF. So our IMRF rate, Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund rate, did increase from 19 to 20 by 10%. So that was an impact. And total citywide IMRF expense is $1.4 million. Doke. I was going to mention too that 70% of the overall operating costs, over 70% of our operating costs in the general fund are related to personnel expenses. So that's one of the reasons we do pause and talk about that a little bit more. So when we were working on the budget, before we get to the general fund, some of our solutions were expenditure reductions. We are looking at delaying filling some vacant positions in the general fund in particular. We will continue to delay vehicle purchases and kind of spread things out, and we aren't able to do as much street maintenance as we had planned to, but we have some good plans in place to help facilitate those areas and needs in our city. And while the general fund departments, our directors were given guidelines in June timeframe that basically said, when you put in your budgets, anything other than personnel costs, which they don't have control over unless they change their staffing, that those costs need to be even. We did go through and worked with them, and then sometimes just made changes to further reduce the budget. Trying to get there. But the other side of the coin is revenue increases. And so we have had some revenue increases as of late. Ambulance changes, taxes related to cannabis, which we passed last meeting. And we will be bringing some other changes as well. One nice thing was in the month of October, IML did come out with revised revenue estimates for next year. And so we do look at those and see what we put in the budget earlier in the year, and we were able to make some modest changes there. The final solution, as we note there, will be the use of reserves. Our city's financial policies, which we'll review, does call for maintaining reserves of 60 to 90 days. And so we'll look at where we're projected to be and consider utilizing some reserves. One of the budget balancing initiatives I mentioned is, the consideration of delaying and filling vacant positions. I would have to say there is a spark of fear when you have a general fund position come vacant, because you might not be able to replace it right away. There is a process that we follow here in the city. Randy is a nice guy, but he will say, you gotta wait. And then some of us, of course, do want to help balance the budget. But this is a history of our full-time equivalent employees across the whole city, so not just the general fund. And you can see over the 16, 17-year period that we have decreased our FTEs. And it's kind of shocking to see this picture all at once, but it is one of the things that we've had to do over time. And so just from 19 to 20, that's a reduction of 7 FTEs. One department did increase their FTE a little bit, but 6 or 7 others did decrease them. Library and parks, are impacted by minimum wage changes and are very thrifty and continuing to look at their operations. IT did hold a position vacant last year. That was one of our budget balancing things from last year, and they've decided, that they can still provide services with one less person, so they've committed to that reduction. A couple of departments have implemented when a full-time position came open, considering part-time, some sort of part-time solution, and so that was part of the reduction. So 7 reduced FTEs from last year, and then from the beginning of that schedule to the far right, that's 38 less employees. All right, general fund. So kind of a summary schedule here. Total proposed general fund revenues right now is, which doesn't just include the general fund. There's also some special general funds that we have to, like, especially related to police seizure funds and things where we do have to keep those separate in a separate fund, but they're still considered part of the general fund. Anyway, general fund revenues are budgeted at 37.4 million, or up 1.7 million from the adopted budget last year, and then expenditures for those same funds are 38.5 million, up 5.8%. You can see that second column of numbers, the CY20 budget proposed right now. I still have a deficit of about $1 million that we're working on closing that gap. Get back to some color and some pie charts. So general fund expenses, again, 38.5 million. This schedule shows you by department their total budget in rounded millions plus their percent of that total. Police constitutes the largest share at 41%, 15.6 million. Fire at 27%, or 10.5 million. And then public works is 15% of the budget, which is 5.9 million. So 83% of our general fund expenses go towards public safety and public works. And those would be considered any municipal government's core service. Looking at that same 38.5 million by category, you can see the largest pie there, big blue pie, 29.2 million, or 76% of the general fund goes towards personnel expenses. The next largest category is services at 17%. Drilling into that personnel by category, personnel expense by category, 29.1 million. The largest part is salaries, followed by pension expense. And pension expense includes IMRF, police and fire pension, that's 7.2 million we saw earlier, and the employer share of FICA and Medicare. Pension expense represents 28.9%, so almost 29% of total personnel costs, which translates to 53 cents for every salary dollar. The third largest component is health insurance at 2.8 million. Those three categories, salaries, pension, and health insurance, make up 94% of personnel expenditures. Can't move off of personnel yet. 29.1 million. This is showing you how that breaks down to each department. So 23.2 million of that 29.1 million is public safety, police and fire. And this is the same percentage as last year, 79.5%. The next largest is public works at 8%, and then CED at 4.5%. Finance, IT, general admin, and general admin includes the mayor and council departments, and human resources make up the rest. All right, so let's go on to Public Works Enterprise Fund. So right now, what's in the Enterprise Fund budget is 27.6 million. You can see the four major funds there: water, wastewater, stormwater, and refuse. The wastewater fund is worth pointing out as it's the largest of them, with right now $13.7 million in the budget and $4.7 million in debt service. And this is mostly IEPA low interest loans. Their charges for services, so the wastewater charges for services, makes up 97% of their operating revenues. Sometimes we refer to charges for services as user fees. The user fees should be set at a level to fund the future debt service plus cover operating costs such as personnel, services, and supplies, and maintain our infrastructure. So Parks and Rec, their expenditures right now in the budget are $6.36 million. They are also an enterprise fund. They're made up of several departments, such as golf courses, the two golf courses, Whitewater Junction and Rifac. In addition to user fees, they do receive support from property taxes, and they allocate it to the departments where it makes sense to have the property tax be assigned to them. So of their $5.5 million in revenue, property taxes makes up 36%. So you'll hear him sometimes refer to the three-legged stool. So the one leg of the stool is now 36% if we pass that property tax. Their personnel expenses make up 36.6% of their budget. So a smaller portion of the budget, but they have a lot of services and supply costs. The library fund, their expenditures are at $2.8 million, $2.78 million. They are a governmental fund and therefore supported by property taxes and limited user fees, not too much there. Proposed expenditures are the $2.8 million in revenues, a bit over $2.6 million. And so the property tax piece of their revenues is programmed at $2.2 million, and that is 83% of their revenues. And then personnel expenses for the library make up 65% of their budget. All right, so property tax allocations for 2020. So as we talk about property taxes, right now this is what is in the budget. It's recommended by staff, but ultimately the city council is the one that has to approve the property tax levy. There are steps that need to take place from a legal standpoint related to the property tax. Property tax for any government is an important revenue source, and first of all, right now what's in the budget is $13,728,435. And we'll see a little snapshot of how that compares to this year's, the levy that supported this year's operations. But overall, that increase is in dollars is $981,000. 52.6% of this proposed levy, that blue pie slice on the right, is allocated to supporting police and fire pensions. And again, those police and fire pensions, that employer contribution is provided to us by an actuarial analysis. We've had a couple of council meetings where we've looked at that this year, and we do that every year. You can also see the other portions there. But we'll look at that in a different way, in a table format. So this table breaks down last year's levy, so we call that the 2018 levy that supports 2019 operations. General fund, police, and fire would receive 69% of that property tax levy. The library and parks and rec each show an increase of 2%, so you can see the difference from one year to the next in that far right calendar. I do have to point out to you that the library did ask for a 4.99% increase earlier this year. Included in this table is the city's property valuation, which is part of the formula that is used to calculate a taxing body's property tax rate. So I anxiously await for an envelope to show up in my inbox every August. This year it was a few days later than I expected, but what that envelope has on it is the estimated increase in our value across the whole city, all of our 15,914 parcels. So the county notified us that the tentative valuation would be $484,374,684, and that was a 0.96% increase from the last certified valuation. It is important to note that sometimes the final extended valuation is different from what we're using on the estimated. So last year, the valuation when all the taxes were extended and all the property tax appeals, finalized, our rate was actually a little bit less than we anticipated it would be when we passed the property tax levy. But you never know; it could go either way. did certainly expect more EAV growth this year. The accounting department did spend some time analyzing the values compared to prior years and did identify some changes. We had some nonprofits purchase some significant parcels in town, which takes those parcels off the tax roll, and then, you know, that has to be spread amongst the remaining property owners, so to speak. Did have a significant property tax appeal that was going on for some time be successful. And, yep. And then some parcels that we just knew were in a decline, and, you know, when the township came through and updated their quadrennial assessment, it did impact us.
Stephanie,
So-
a quick question about
For sure.
appeals. Does the city play any role in, maybe this is a better question for Dave here, but does the city play any role in the appeal process for some of our larger commercial property owners?
So I will attempt to answer that a little bit. So there is a legal process that the county and assessor's office have to follow when they get an appeal. If it's over a certain threshold, they do notify the city and all the taxing districts, actually, and you have the right to intervene. There is an intergovernmental agreement where each of the governments do sometimes pay someone to argue the taxing body's side of it. So it's a little bit of, sometimes you get the notification and you don't do anything, and other times there's a word for it, but the property tax appeals group will meet and review. We do get occasionally, we have intervened in the last few years, and then we do get a legal bill for those services.
Sure. So it's a standing body between all of the taxing bodies that review whenever the county says, hey, heads up, there's somebody doing a large appeal on their property tax
If it's a
bill?
large appeal, yes.
Who serves on that, I guess, for the city of Rock Island?
So I do get notified.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you participate on that? Okay, and is there a general policy, or how do you make the decision as a group to appeal or not appeal? Or to fight the appeal or not fight the appeal?
You know, I think it's difficult because there's also the concept that, you know, these are generally businesses, you know, that businesses deserve the right to pay fair taxes, you know, for their parcel, you know, and so you want to maintain a good business relationship, you know, and so how bad do you want to fight it? So it just kind of all depends. If it were unreasonable, then there would be action. But sometimes it's just reasonable. It's a product of the market and change in use since the original assessment. You know, sometimes,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
All right, so this is, not look at, gosh, I'm gonna go back a slide. I think I got sidetracked here. So the property tax rate for this year's levy was 2.657, and for the proposed levy, it's 2.8343. So that is a 6.67% increase over last year's extended levy. So keep in mind that 2.8343 as I go to the next slide. So this is a line graph of the history of the city's tax rate by collection year from 1986. I was still in high school at Alleman to this proposed levy. So you can see it's changed over time to a point to just kind of highlight there's a period of time there, as you can see, probably I think it's like 2006 through 2017, where it was very level. And that's a 10-year period where the city did not increase the property tax rate at all. The high point there in the early 90s, the high point of that graph on the left side, that rate was 4.1249, so over 4% of the property tax bill. There's a little bit of a blip there in 2005 where it kind of went up before it went down to that leveling off period that I mentioned. That rate was 2.573, and again, that was 2005. So part of the formula of our rate is our EAV history, and here's a line graph that shows the EAV history. The data points are marked that even line, and it's just a trend line that's inserted for visual reference. This history goes back to 2003. The positive thing is that overall we do see an increase in our EAV over time, which we want as for our residents and own personal finances. The 0.96% this past year compares to 0.46% last year, so a little less than 0.5%. And the year before that, it was 0.73. So we've been under 1% for 3 years in a row. So hopefully next year will be our year.
Question.
Yes.
On the previous slide, the history of the tax rate for the city, so the early 90s, it starts to drop to the late 2000s. I was not even born in 86, so somebody help me with some history here. Were we experiencing robust growth in this city in the 90s? I guess what explains why our,
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but everyone was experiencing a lot of growth in the 90s, if you remember. The whole
No.
country was.
I don't.
Well, the whole country was, let's put it that way.
Thank you
I
for
mean,
the,
our federal budget had a surplus instead of a deficit.
okay.
So it was increasing quite rapidly. And if you saw the other slide too, maybe it's the next slide, you can see even in the 2000s how it was going up until about 2011 or so at a
Okay.
pretty good clip. So it's easy to keep the tax rate the same when that EAV is rising. And
Sure.
what we've seen now lately is it just
So
isn't,
even
it
though the
isn't
rate
keeping up.
came down, people's property taxes might have gone up.
Property
because
taxes
the
still went up,
EAV
Yeah, the property
was going up,
value.
and so.
but the rate did not. The rate was either coming down or stable.
And that's trying to remind people, I guess, the difference between EAV and the tax rate.
Yeah, yeah, I just was curious. It's not like, I don't know, I mean, in my brief experience on this planet, nothing really gets any cheaper, right? So I was curious why we were able to ease off the property tax rate, but thank you, that explains it.
So again, there are 6 portions to the City of Rock Island's property tax levy. That last column on the right depicts the proposed 2019 levy of $13.7 million. We talked about fire and police pension costs are provided through the actuary. And then you can see from the bottom portion of the graph, that light green portion of each year's levy. In 2011, that green area represented 3.4 million. So 3.4 million. In 2019, that proposed levy allocates 2.2 million to the general fund. It's harder to see on this graph, but from 2011 through 2014, both library and parks' levy remained completely flat. So we did not give them any increase. And then starting in 2015, it did inch up slightly. You know, and I'm sure you can appreciate that parks and libraries' expenses continue to increase, with many of their expenses related to personnel costs. So property taxes do certainly gain a lot of attention by citizens, and sometimes we do have to remind them that the City of Rock Island is only one portion of their property tax bills. Unfortunately, with Rock Island sharing the name that's on the envelope, they often assume that the entire bill is related to city operations, since we share the same name with the county. But there are other layers of governments, and we refer to that as overlapping tax districts. So that includes the county, township, school district, airport, college, Blackhawk College, and transit authority. Each taxing district establishes their own levy. This table shows a 6-year history of the breakdown of a tax bill. and shows that for the 2018 levy, so last year's levy that was payable this year, we should have all made our last payment here, the city of Rock Island's portion of that bill, when you add the two green rows, city 20.8% and the library 4.2%, the sum of those is 25%. So the city's portion of that property tax bill was 25%, and very similar to what it was in 2013, at a bit over 24%. The school district portion is 50.6%, which isn't unusual here in the state of Illinois. So, to try to break down the proposed property tax levy to an impact on a homeowner in particular, for a $100,000 assessed value home, so a $100,000 home that's owner occupied, so we get a little bit of an exemption. For 2019, for the 2019 levy over last year's levy would translate to $48 additional dollars per year, or $4 a month, $4.04 a month. We do show you some historical reference, so we do just show you that 2005 number, kind of that with that little blip in the one graph where it was a little higher at 2.573, what the rate was. It is interesting to see how the portions of the levy have changed over time as well. So in conclusion, it is definitely my honor to present you the 2020 budget. A lot of tears and sweat go into this, and we still have some more tears and sweat to eke out. But it is a mix of solutions that will be used to present a balanced budget. So increased revenues, staff cuts, reduced spending, use of resources, or fund balance in order to continue to maintain a high level of service. Some of these actions are difficult, but through them, if supported, allows the city to maintain appropriate reserves. I do have to thank city staff and council and finance staff, all the directors, for the countless hours that they spend on this budget. Budgeting in uncertain times can be difficult, but it is good to remember that we do have adequate reserves. Our bond rating is investment grade, and this budget is presented with future financial strength in mind and does have a blend of changes for consideration. One last slide, and then I'll open it up again for comments and questions. So one of the next steps for the budget is to meet with all of the department directors next week. So you won't be listening to me talk next week. You'll be listening to each of the directors and their staff present overviews of their budget. So we'll do that next Monday night, starting at 5. And then we do have a few council meetings ahead of us. So we have November 25th, but we plan on bringing that budget appropriations ordinance to you for first reading at the December 9th meeting, and then a second reading and approval on December 16th. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
Yep, sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Thanks, again, echoing what you said. Thanks for all the work that you and city staff do on this. I know it takes a lot of time, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate our candid conversations about it, too. Did I see it correct in that this is another planned deficit budget?
So right now, it is $1 million deficit. So how, we still have some options in which we could use to balance it, but I'm thinking that we will use some reserves. And I do, while I say that and I squint and look like I'm uncomfortable, I am really looking at 2019 activity and where I think we'll end. I'm pretty certain that we'll end up better than even what we budgeted. So even with the P25 payment, and we've had some added overtime costs than what we budgeted, overall revenues are for the most part, coming in better. Departments are, as always, just because they have a budget does not mean they spend it, and that is how we operate. And even within a budget, we're always trying to, do more with less. So I do really feel like we'll have fund balance reserves to carry over to next year. So yes, it's possible that we would be, presenting you a budget, the general fund budget that has expenditures exceeding general fund revenues, but I would present it that we would have 2019 reserves to carry over to that. Plus, we would still be within our financial policies of 60 to 90 days reserves. We actually finished 2018 at, gosh, what was it? 80 some days of reserves in the general fund. So I think we'll be okay.
Does my memory serve me correctly that the deficit budgeting, or what, having a deficit in this year's budget was part of our bond agency, bond rating agency's review? I mean, are we concerned about any effects on our bond rating by having another deficit budget?
So that was an item.
I like making you use your crystal ball. I always ask you these questions like, what are
I
the bond
know.
rating agencies
Well,
going to
and
do?
it's always fun to say, okay, I think we're going to end, $800,000 ahead in
Right.
PPRT, and I can't wait to see, when accounting finishes the journal entries. Am I right? Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm not. But that really, it was cited, the deficit in the general fund. But it wasn't the main reason for the downgrade.
Okay.
I mean, really, truly, it's the downgrade was a result of our debt and our pension funding.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but it's a good point. It's something to think about. And when we talk about being fiscally responsible in our choices, in a perfect world, we would present a general fund budget that would have a 0 at the bottom. And there's a lot of great things happening that points us in that direction where there is growth in the city. There's a lot of projects going on. And as you guys all know, we get excited about an economic development project and then it wanes, and then I get excited about it, and then one proceeds forward. We have a lot of those projects that have been in the works the last few years that are moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so I'm fairly confident that our major employers are all doing well in town. The Arsenal is doing well. Our healthcare facility is doing well. Augie is doing great. They have good enrollment numbers. Everything's pointing towards continued growth. And so I would like to say I would use my crystal ball, and that budgeting will get easier in the years to come.
Yeah, and historical context, I remember the first budget that I had the fun of going through in 2017. That deficit,
Started with a $5 million.
$5 million deficit, and we ended up with a balanced budget that year, right? So that wasn't very fun.
Yeah.
But now, what, two million something was
So
the
a couple weeks
deficit?
ago, we were at 2.9, and
Right.
since then, we've gotten it down to $1 million.
Right, so long-term, working at addressing this, when I started, $5 million hole in our general fund, that now incrementally, maybe in another 5 years, if I'm still up here, we can have a, not a deficit to start things out in the general fund, so.
Let me just add to that, of course, with that, it's been property tax increases with that each one of those years to help get that reduction. So it's not just expenditure reductions, it's been some income.
It's been both.
And deals, so it's been both, and which is, I'm not saying it's unhealthy, it's fine, but at some point, you do have to stop the taxing part of it and try to get it, there's new people coming in, new businesses growing, or coming in, and existing businesses growing for your new revenue. Versus increasing and taxing the exact same people you're doing. Because if there's two complaints that I guess I hear the most, there's potholes and property taxes. And I couldn't tell you which one's first because I hear them, and I'm not going to debate that. And so it is very, very difficult to try to continue to balance it with increased property taxes. We've become, obviously continue to be one of the highest ones in the Quad Cities. And so we need to be conscious of that. but it's necessary. And as I talked earlier today just with somebody, you know, there's no doubt that, once again, if you take a look at a bigger window, I'm going to talk the other side of my mouth, is that there was a number of years, as we just saw, that there was none. But yet our expenses were increasing. And so if you average, go back, you know, 5 years, 7, 8 years, it's not as bad as what it looks now. Now, obviously, this still affects the pocketbook. Any increase is not the best, unless it's an EAV, because they're saying the value of your home's worth more. So that's the positive part of it. So, you know, so it is sometimes a necessary evil. I don't like it. The citizens don't like it. We got to make sure that we continue to work hard at watching those dollars. I can say that it is firsthand that when talking to a lot of the department managers, along with the city manager, everything else, there's no doubt that's the number one thing in their mind is expenses. Everybody's had some pain. We are getting down to the bare bones. I've said this for a couple of years, so it's kind of like, when is it? But we're getting down to the point, it's core services that could be affected next, and that's the unfortunate part, but if we want to see that. The other is, of course, continuing, as Stephanie mentioned, continue to work on economic development. And, you know, we heard from GTI earlier today, but the issue is there's one that's $17 million expansion that's going to add a lot of dollars to the property tax rolls, and a lot of employees that hopefully spend their money and work in Rock Island. And so we got to continue to encourage those businesses like that to make those investments. You know, we can go on, and I don't want to do the list, but the larger ones, the McLaughlin's is an example. There's others. We got, hopefully in the near future, the Best Building project that we've talked about, and we probably won't see much effect of that in 2020, but hopefully in 2021, we'll see that, whether it be the marijuana sales, et cetera. But, so we hope to see those, and we need to keep encouraging, and you don't, that's the last place you want to sometimes cut spending money, is working and encouraging those type of developments, because they pay in the long run. A lot of people, that's the first place they cut. Well, then if you cut your sales, you don't get any more sales coming in, and then longer term, it affects you. It's exactly. So, you know, it's kind of accounting 101 here, don't get me wrong. But that's where we got to make sure that we continue to encourage the businesses that we have here in the Quad Cities, or in Rock Island, to grow and add jobs. And we should not be the barrier for those things at any point. So I just strongly encourage the county or the council to keep that in mind, if that makes some sense. So thank you. Appreciate all the hard work.
And I also want to add to that, you know, I think we looked at the graphs that you did, and the sales tax revenue's down, food and beverage is down. And I think too, to support those businesses that are making the investment in Rock Island and to help ourselves, we really, as citizens, need to support those businesses so they stay here. If we purchase from them, you know, eat in restaurants, those sales tax dollars will increase. You know, I said it at the Unplugged event too. You know, I hear people wanting to go to Iowa to buy gas over there because it's cheaper. Well, if you buy gas in Rock Island, yes, you are paying that gas tax, but guess what? That gas tax is getting poured back into your roads now. So by shopping in Rock Island, by supporting Rock Island businesses, you keep them here in town, you keep our revenue growing, but also you're supporting your roads, so you're helping yourself by shopping here locally.
I added to that also, is that shopping in the Illinois Quad Cities in general feeds Rock Island, because the 1% for the schools is shared throughout the county. And so just even if you're going to keep it, and once again, the South Park malls, the things in Moline or East Moline, et cetera, buying cars, by keeping it in Illinois Quad Cities helps Rock Island, Milan school system, along with the other school systems. So we need to make sure we keep that in mind for the schools and the city of Rock Islands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I gotta remember what number we're on here. 13.
An ordinance amending Chapter 4, Article 3 of the Code of Ordinances regarding signs.
Suspend the rules and pass the ordinance.
Second?
Moved to second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargettis.
Yes.
Alderwoman Swanson.
Yes.
Alderman Parker.
Aye.
Alderman Pulis.
Aye.
Alderman Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 14.
An ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Code of Ordinances with the addition of Article 9 regarding solar energy.
Move to consider, suspend the rules, and pass the ordinance.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 15.
Claims will be in 3 groups. A, report from the Human Resources Department regarding payment in the amount of $18,504.78 to David Morrison of Rock Island, Illinois, for legal services rendered from September 30th, 2019 through October 31st, 2019. And B, report from the Human Resources Department regarding payment in the amount of $4,075.82 to Farmers Insurance for a general liability claim.
Move to accept the reports and authorize payment as recommended for claims items A and B.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried. C and D. C, report from the Public Works Department regarding payment number 1 in the amount of $46,329 to Langman Construction Incorporated of Rock Island, Illinois for the 2019 pavement patching program for services provided from September 1st, 2019 through October 18th, 2019. And D, report from the Public Works Department regarding payment in the amount of $25,831.99 to Valley Construction of Rock Island, Illinois for an emergency storm sewer repair at Ridgewood Road and Andalusia Road.
Move to accept the reports and authorize payment as recommended for claim items C and D.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion?
I need to recuse myself due to the nature of my employment.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
4 ayes, no nays, motion carried. And E, report from the Information Technology Department regarding payment in the amount of $10,973 to Tri-City Electric Incorporated of Davenport, Iowa for professional services for the Mitel Connect upgrade transition.
Move to accept the report and authorize payment as recommended and authorize the city manager to sign the upgrade agreement.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion?
I just had one quick question. In the memo, it mentioned, I'm trying to get to the second page of the memo here, that the amount is to cover the hours expended to do the job, but not to cover anything, not to include hardware or applicable taxes. So we do expect more expense to this besides the $10,973?
Not at this time. There'll be some hardware that'll have to be replaced in 2021, but not in this next year.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 16.
Claims for the weeks of September 27, 2019 through October 3, 2019 in the amount of $301,454.92. October 25, 2019 through October 31, 2019 in the amount of $869,967.77. And November 1st, 2019 through November 7th, 2019 in the amount of $1,430,787.07, and payroll for the weeks of October 21st, 2019 through November 3rd, 2019 in the amount of $1,497,407.90.
Move to allow the claims in the payroll.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 17.
Report from the Community and Economic Development Department regarding the sale of city-owned property, parcel 096-525, 2011 Fourth Avenue, to 20th Street RI Lofts LLC for $25,000 plus closing costs.
Move to approve the purchase agreement as recommended, authorize the city manager to execute the contract documents, and consider suspend the rules and pass the ordinance.
Second.
Move to second. Any discussion?
Thank you for the map.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargettis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays. Motion carried.
Item 18.
Report from the Community and Economic Development Department regarding an ordinance to streamline the process for the sale of municipal property for redevelopment.
I move that Chapter 11 with the addition of Article 10 be amended for the proposed ordinance, and move to consider to suspend the rules and pass the ordinance.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
The reason for the change, the amendment was just to give a number to the ordinance section, that's all. That's the only difference.
Sure. Could I have Tara, Miles, I'm not sure who, could we have city staff come up here and explain what is being proposed?
So, back in 2016, by resolution, the council adopted a collection of guidelines for how staff would handle the sale of city-owned parcels, okay? These guidelines helped to provide some standards by which we would determine whether a property should or should not be sold. So, for example, when looking at something, we would try to determine whether or not it was ultimately a loss for us to hold on to it. Basically, if it's a vacant lot, is it costing us more to mow it every year than we're getting out of it? You know, all that kind of stuff. The problem, though, with these guidelines that we have been using is that they have too many steps in the process. So if we followed it to the T, we would be coming back to you 3 total times to sell something. And if it's a vacant lot, we're most often selling it to someone who wants to, expand their side yard. We're just trying to get rid of something we don't need to hold on to and put it back on the tax rolls. And it seemed to be a bit too much of a burden to have someone come back to the council 3 times and extend that process a bit too far. In a different context, when it comes to economic development projects, and Tara can add on to this, of course, too, we would always come up with some sort of agreement for how that sale was going to go forward in the context of that development project agreement, okay? So the purpose of changing this and actually creating an ordinance where all of this is codified is to make it simpler, one step, and also to acknowledge the fact that there's kind of a multitude of different sales types that we're going through that really either don't need to be complicated because it's a very simple sale, or are already codified in some sort of larger agreement. So that is kind of the summary of what this is meant to achieve. And Tara, do you have anything you'd like to add?
There is some redundancy, as Miles mentioned. While development agreements do require a little bit more scrutiny than, say, the sale of a side yard parcel, we're passing an ordinance for the development agreement and for the sale of the property, and oftentimes those two things are linked together. The sale of the property makes no sense if the development agreement doesn't go forward. So there are times where we may bring it to you in separate parts, but most often it makes sense to bring the information to you, let you consider it, ask your questions.
Ordinance makes us, this doesn't affect our transparency at all. It's so, if anyone had any considerations or concerns with that regard.
Right, and there does, you'll see in the ordinance, there is still a public hearing, then there'll be notification of the public. They could come down and, anyone from the public could come down and express their pleasure or displeasure or counteroffer for a piece of property. But it would be done at the same time rather than doing it in a three-step process.
Because currently under the guidelines, what we would need to do is we first need to come to you as the council and ask, can we sell something? Then the second step is to have you approve a purchase agreement. And then the third step is to have you pass an ordinance for the sale. That all seems to be just a little bit excessive, and oftentimes what we would actually bring to you is all of those things kind of packaged together and just circumvent that, because it just didn't seem necessary a lot of the time. And the other thing too is that I think you were talking about the legal notice for all of these sales and everything, so.
That's correct, and it's something that actually we modeled off of the IML's model ordinance that they put out in 2018 because of some of the, because of you wanting to encourage the redevelopment and to not have developers say, well, gosh, I have to go through a 3-step process, and then maybe somebody else comes in and goes ahead and X's me out of it as well. So they were, with home rule communities, this was a solution that they had come up with.
This would still ultimately, so what we're proposing, instead of the 3-phase, as you just described, a process, we would just have one night where we pass an ordinance.
Yeah, with the purchase agreement.
With the purchase agreement,
Yeah.
with the price.
Right.
So we would eliminate having you come here and say, hey, can we sell this property? Yes. And then come back and say, can we sell it for this price? Yes. And then come
Right.
back and say, okay, now pass something that says we can sell this at this price.
Right.
Okay, so, and so what I would like to say is that, you know, the consideration for not suspending the rules, right? We're selling to taxpayer, you know, we're selling the citizens' property. So if it is not like the developer or whatever is breathing down our necks saying, you gotta sell it now, whatever, then as it's written in agendas, please consider writing it out to not suspend the rules. I recognize that that would create a second time that we would have to read the ordinance and pass it, which kind of defeats the purpose of this, which is not why I'm requesting that it absolutely require 2 readings. But I guess if it's not necessary, my request would be to allow it 2 readings. But if it's like, got to do this now, otherwise this guy's walking, or gal, or they, then it can be expedited. But just keep that in consideration, please.
We appreciate that. I think what we would kind of politely put back forward and, you know, is we have hundreds of parcels that we own. I mean, in our parcel inventory, I mean, there are dozens and dozens that do nothing but cause a cost to the city that are just vacant, unproductive parcels that we would ideally like to rapidly dispense with and put back onto the tax rolls. So in many of the way that Tara and I share the responsibility of overseeing our property inventory, our internal inventory, she handles the commercial, business, industrial properties, I handle the residential ones. And I have many, many, many that I would like to start reaching out to neighbors and just say, hey, do you want to split this with your neighbor? Do you want to expand your side yard? Would you like to have a little more room for a garage? All that kind of stuff. And if we could start unloading those and putting them back on the tax rolls in rapid fashion, that would be something that I think would benefit the community a great deal and reduce the administrative burden for staff who have to keep track of quite a lot of information, so. So I understand what you're saying, but we also, you know, are trying to figure out ways to try and offload properties that have no municipal purpose whatsoever and just cause us to continue to incur costs.
Right. I trust your judgment. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, roll call, please.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 19.
Report from the Public Works Department regarding Sunset Marina 2020 rate changes.
To approve the Sunset Marina 2020 rate changes as presented and recommended.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm good with the whole thing, but my question is, what's the purpose of not having for sale signs on the boats that are for sale, and instead having just an announcement on the bulletin board?
We're just finding a lot more people are coming down and wanting to know where those boats are. And it's giving us an opportunity to like really walk with them when they come in the office. And we've been really showcasing the marina with those boats. And it's kind of my opportunity to show off and show them like how great it is. If you buy this boat, maybe you could stay here. they're not out of the region.
It's not a deal breaker for me. I was just wondering why, because when I drive down to the marina and I see a sign on a boat for sale, then it sort of stimulates my curiosity about that particular boat, if it's something that, you know, I would be interested in, for example. So the more places that you see the information, whether it's on the boat, on the bulletin board, on the internet, in the newspaper, the more chances are you're gonna sell the boat.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd ask what the reason was. Thank you.
Also, if it's on in the slips and everything else, those gates are locked and not open to the general public.
Yeah, you
and
can only
so-
see the ones on the perimeter. I also had the idea that maybe there should be an area where there are slips for boats that are for sale, that they could be placed there, sort of like a boat car lot.
Sure. You know, there are some slip holders that have had their slips for, 50 years. We have some people down on 100 Dock who've been there even since they've been children. So some of them have very sentimental value. Some of them closer to shore, like on 500 Dock, that's absolutely where a lot of them are going. So I agree with you that if they're kind of collected together, it does make it easier when people are coming in to look at boats and checking out the marina.
And also, as long as you're here, wanted to compliment you on some of the changes in this fee structure, but also just in general at the marina. I think there's some good things happening down there. I know we didn't have a very good boating season because of the flooding, and I still am getting questions about when we're getting a restaurant. So whenever you can give us information on that, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so the restaurant, I know we've been working with Mike and a couple other people, just trying to see what steps we need to take, because we are really interested in doing that. With the flood, it slowed down a lot of that progress. So unfortunately, like you said, we did have a really short boating season. That's kind of why these half-season rates really came up, that we really need to make them appropriate so that when people want to come in, that we're not penalizing our boaters that have been there for a full season and making it so that these people are still paying kind of a similar structure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson. Yes. Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays. Motion carried.
Item 20.
Report from the Public Works Department regarding Sunset Marina 2020 contract changes, including full payment discounts, deferred payment arrangements, and other updated information.
Move to approve the Sunset Marina contract changes as presented and recommended.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays. Motion carried.
Item 21.
Report from the Community and Economic Development Department regarding a request from Robert Bucher for a revision to the Plan Unit Development, PUD, plan for the property located at approximately 3001 Friendship Drive, parcel 105102.
Motion to approve the proposed revisions to the PUD plan and as submitted and recommended.
Second.
Moved and second, multiple times. Any discussion?
Bob, you've been waiting for a while. Do you want to share?
I don't know. I'll talk about it. Of course, hopefully the council knows I've been down in that area for 17 years. And I just want to try to get this thing off of grass and turn it into something productive for the city. I pray that this will work. I can't guarantee anything, but I have a full faith that this will be successful. It's not what I wanted to do when I came in there 17 years ago. I didn't want to build everything on the property. I wanted to sell it and do a commercial, but the market didn't happen, and here I am, trying to make it work.
Like a good plan.
All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays. Motion carried.
Item 22.
Report from the city clerk regarding applications for plaza events from the Daiquiri Factory for the upcoming 2020 season, including the outdoor sale and consumption of alcohol where noted.
Move to approve the submitted 2020 plaza events as recommended, subject to complying with all plaza and liquor license regulations and subject to being closed down early if complaints are received.
Second.
The second, any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
Item 23.
Report from the city clerk regarding a request from the Rock Island Rotary for a new event, the Rotary Reindeer Rambo 5K Run, to be held on Sunday, December 8th, 2019, between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m.
Motion to approve the new event as recommended?
Second.
Move to second, any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Spargattis.
Yes.
Swanson.
Yes.
Parker.
Aye.
Pulis.
Aye.
Geenan.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, motion carried.
24, other business.
I have a few things. Sorry, I know we want to get going. One, so I got an email from a constituent, and I see my neighbor back there in the back who was at city council a month or two ago. Randy, are we still on track to consider the proposed humane pet store ordinance this month?
We are, and I'm getting a thumbs up from Miles. So yeah, we've talked about it a number of times, so it is, as you remember, we had a whole host of ordinances, and it was coming up.
You've
so.
been a busy guy. I appreciate you.
It got pushed down the list, I'm sorry.
No, I understand and I appreciate it. I'm doing my due diligence representing the good people like my neighbor in the back to make sure.
It is coming.
I appreciate that. And then lastly, sorry to bring up my favorite historic mansion in Rock Island's Fifth Ward again. But, so as most of us, I imagine, are familiar, the Hallberg Estate has their Winter in Bloom event every year. I think last year, we celebrated the 50th year of this event? 50 years we've been doing Winter in Bloom at Hallberg. That's pretty awesome. Last year, before we modified our representation fund, or before we created a representation fund policy, I used $500 from my representation fund to purchase the many, many, many poinsettias that decorate Hallberg for that event. Understanding that we have modified our representation fund, or created a representation fund policy, I'm not able to do that this year. So I would like to come to my colleagues here and figure out if there is support for identifying some way that we can collectively chip in $500 for poinsettias to make the Winter in Bloom event. I mean, it's not really in bloom unless there's poinsettias there, right? So I don't know what everyone is comfortable with, but if it's finding, like I earlier asked about, using some leftover funds from this fund to pay for it, if it's, I'm sure that between all of us in our representation funds, we'd have not spent the 3,000, I think now is what we have. If we can share that or privately, I don't know, I don't care. I'm just
Well, if
asking.
council wants to do that, you just give me the go-ahead. It's $500. It doesn't require formal approval, and staff will figure out how to make it happen.
I would support that.
I would not.
I do not, as far as, I know I'm not voting here, but
Yeah.
I do not use it in representation. A great cause, I mean, else either we want to give it personally or whatever, that's fine, but.
I mean, I think there's a lot of organizations that would love to have blooms of poinsettias for all their holiday decorations.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of being a nonprofit is fundraising to find those. And I mean, if you want to personally donate them, by all means, go ahead, but
It is a municipal building, and it's a Parks and Recreation Department event, correct? Well, is it? It's Friends of Hallberg's now? Okay, previously it was before the MOU. Okay, so I stand corrected. It is a nonprofit technical event, but still, it's at a municipal property. It makes the event.
Okay, you got this side, I don't know if you want to.
If you would like to come to me for a private donation, we can discuss that.
I think I would personally give to it as well. I just think you'll be opening up a can of worms. We have the Botanical Center that have their Lights Festival. That brings in a lot. That would look wonderful with poinsettias in their place as well. And that's in the city of Rock Island too. I just think that's setting a precedence. I don't think we want to go down.
Okay. Okay. Any other good for the cause comments, thoughts? Need a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, and nobody for comment, that's fine. Okay, second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? What's that? Is Randy okay? Good, thank you. Great, appreciate the update.